Okay guys, so today we're going to start this one with a question. And I want to ask, how many of you guys feel like negative self-talk actually impacts upon your surfing? I know that for myself, it definitely does at certain times, and the same is for the majority of us. And it can really impact the enjoyment we have in the water, as well as how we go about surfing in our practice as well. It does unfortunately make us surf worse in the way of just overanalyzing everything, getting caught in ruts, and just generally being overly critical of ourselves. Now, I just had an epic weekend of surfing at the Victorian State Championships. That, as well as my birthday, were the reasons that this video was late, so apologies for that. But it did get me thinking about the negative self-talk elements that can find their way into our surfing in competitions, but also, and more importantly, our general surfing day-to-day. So it's definitely something I think will help a lot of people today. What we will do today is I'm going to delve into 3 of the top strategies that I use myself to get on top of the negative self-talk and make sure it's not influencing our surfing. As well as one little bonus tip at the end that I think can really help to think about how we're going to improve and go about our surfing. And if you are new here, my name is Ben Considine, and I'm a longboard enthusiast, coach, competitive surfer, and I'm here to share my learnings and experiences like this one today with you all. So if you enjoy the videos and like what we're doing here, then please feel free to subscribe. As well as if you know anyone else who might find this useful, please feel free to share it with them as well. Let's get straight into the edit. So I wanted to start off with a bit of a personal anecdote as to why I wanted to talk about this today. Obviously, I just had the state championships happen over the weekend, which was super fun. But contests in general, especially when we lose, it can be pretty brutal in terms of our attitude and our self-talk. And, you know, this is where it becomes really important, and we do need to get a hold of it, because otherwise competitions and just surfing in general, if we're not surfing the way that we want to, it can be pretty difficult for ourselves and not only our motivation, but our enjoyment out in the water, and also how we're viewing ourselves as well, which is really, really important. Now, the first strategy that I wanted to run through with you guys is actually using a verbal cue or verbal cues to help with the negative self-talk. This sort of comes from the basis of our emotions aren't necessarily the best conveyors of absolute truth. Quite often we can get caught in a bit of a cycle, which we'll speak about in a second, and I've found personally that this has been a really good way to break away from that. If we step into what happens in competitions and what happened a little bit over the weekend, there's a lot of different contest scenarios which can impose this negative self-talk. One of the most prominent ones that I'm used to is not starting off a heat correctly. So where maybe you haven't caught a wave for a little while, or the first wave you catch is not a good one, you're full, or the wave just doesn't open up the way that you want to, and you're starting to think that this is going to negatively affect your heat as well. Now, there's not a lot of time in a heat. There's 20 minutes, so you really can't allow the negative self-talk to take control and influence your surfing, which, if it does take control, it will definitely influence your surfing. Now, the verbal cues can be a really good way to make sure that we are not dwelling on things, and we're not dwelling on things that don't matter, but we're taking some constructive feedback away. If we use this in the context of what you guys might be going through if you're not competing, but you're just surfing in general, quite often, especially if we've had multiple attempts at a certain maneuver, or we're just having a lot of trouble with conditions, we can get really, really down on ourselves. And we'll start on this endless cycle of negative self-talk where we'll be saying, I'm not good enough, what am I doing here? All this negative self-talk that tends to run in a cycle, and it's a bit never-ending, but it's not that constructive. And in this instance, I just like to think, what would a coach say to you? They'd probably say to try and take away the best things, or the things that you're actually learning from what's happening, and to try and move on, and don't let that dwell in your head. So that's exactly what we're going to do. From what's happening, so potentially if it's you not completing a maneuver correctly, having difficulty out in the surf, what we're going to do, or if you're in a contest, what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 or 2 key elements of the reasons why maybe you're not succeeding with whatever that might be that you're doing, and you're going to say them out loud. When we say this out loud, it's a good consolidation of the fact that we understand the problem, we know what's going on, and that's our cue to then move forward. So we can move on from this and we break that cycle going on in our heads. I do think it's really important, at least for me, maybe I'm a bit weird, but to say it out loud. So, all right, I'm going to stay lower and I need to make sure that the position that I have on the wave is higher than what it is. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And I know that there's a rhyme and reason as to why it's not working and something that I can actually attempt to troubleshoot. So we can absolutely solidify what we need for improvement, and then we can move on and be more present and start enjoying our surf again. Now we're going to take a time out. That's strategy number 2, and it's a really, really good way to make sure that we are resetting our system and again, not getting caught in this endless loop. So the timeout is essentially just designed to make sure that we're doing something completely different. If you are focusing on cross-stepping and it's frustrating you, which I think we've all been there, what we're going to do is we're just going to surf a wave the way you normally would. In a heat scenario, if I'm getting a little bit frustrated, all I need to think of is make it easy, go surfing. They're my 2 cues that I use because I know I can ride a wave. I know I can surf okay. So I can make sure that I'm not running in this loop and this endless cycle of negative self-talk, and I can just focus on being more present, which is going to positively influence our surfing rather than being caught up in these negative thoughts. But for the general surf, if we're practicing maneuvers and or if the conditions are tricky, resetting and just taking a time out by catching a wave the way that you normally would is a really, really good way just to reset your baseline, make yourself happy again, catch a good wave, and then we can go back and attempt whatever we're trying. I find this really, really helps as well because we've already learned a lot about what's not working, and by resetting ourselves, we can come at the approach with a different attitude, a bit more of a positive attitude after we've had a couple waves to take a break and cruise for a little bit. And so I find that this is a really, really good way to reset yourself and get the most out of your sessions too. Now, just a quick little add in there. I just wanted to say that for strategies 1 and 2, we can also reverse those and flip those around. Speaking from experience, if you're getting very frustrated in a session, it might be best to take that timeout approach first. So just go catch a couple waves, just remind yourself surfing's fun, and go have some good waves and just surf the way you normally would. And then we can try using the verbal cues to come at that with a fresh approach and really nut out exactly what is going wrong and verbalizing those again. And then we can come at the situation with a new perspective, one that's probably a little bit more dialed into giving you some good critical feedback rather than the negative self-talk. Okay, so with strategies 1 and 2, we've focused on what we can do when we're in the water to downregulate that self-talk and hopefully improve our surfing in practice. But for strategy 3, I did want to provide something to focus on what we're doing when we're out of the water. I think even particularly straight after a surf session, we can sometimes feel quite defeated. And I know this is the case as well for if I've lost a heat. I can be really, really self-critical and negative, and I'll be thinking things like, I'm not even a very good surfer, don't know what I'm doing competing, I shouldn't have been out in that heat, and all of this stuff that, even if it was true, isn't good to think about yourself. So there's a couple of things that I like to do here. Similar to what we said out in the water of picking out a couple of things that we can use to practice. We're going to have 2 to 3 takeaways from our session that we can really utilize to constructively build upon our surfing. And again, place a little bit of the onus off us as an individual and having the bad surf session kind of attacking our validity as a surfer. And we're just going to use that as something external that we can then focus on. And if you know me, you know I'm also a big proponent for speaking things out loud and writing things down. Again, I don't think our inner dialogue is often very clear and good at telling us exactly what we need to do. So for this, I really like to make a dot point list of the things that you can focus on as well. You'll be surprised how rational you are when you start to write things down. The thoughts become a little bit clearer, things start to make sense, and the dots connect. And it's something that I definitely use a lot in terms of writing things down, goals, but also things that I'm focusing on within the session, and as well as the big takeaways from heats and losses. So write those down, have 2 to 3 clear takeaways, and then what we can start to do, if you do that enough, is you can also recognize some trends and patterns that might start to come into play as well. Say again, you felt like you're a little bit too extended or too tall for your cross-stepping, and you've noticed that 3 to 4 sessions, maybe it's time to put in a little bit more land practice, or maybe it's time, if something's not working and you've done it consistently and you're finding the same problems, we just need to change up the strategy. Again, use that sort of inner dialogue of what would a coach say to me? Again, they'd probably not put it on you as a personal failure or something like that, but they'd say, okay, we've tried something for long enough now, it might be worth coming back and just revisiting the blueprint of what we're doing. All right, and for the little bonus tip that I wanted to throw in here as well, it's just a good way and a good framework to think about our self-improvement with regards to our surfing. But it comes and stems from this little quote that goes like, we often overestimate what we can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 5 years. And I just think this is really, really apt for our progression as surfers. And quite often we might think, cool, I want to, again, coming back to the cross step example, I want to cross step, and we want to have that down by 2 to 3 sessions. And when we don't get that, again, we feel quite defeated, which is normal, and we'll speak about that in a second. But if we implement the consistency and the few of the things we've spoken about today, we're going to be way beyond that if we can, again, be consistent and make sure that we're practicing properly. I think that by understanding this, we can disrupt that negative self-talk, which is going to be really, really important to do, and understand that it's actually quite normal for us as humans to be discontent with not achieving something. So you're not the only one, and we all go through it. And so I think if we can be a little bit kinder and compassionate to yourself about what's actually going on, it's nothing personal on you. It's just that we need to try some new strategies or practice in some better conditions, or a number of things that we can put it down to, which we can get a little bit more focused on using the tools that we described before. And if we think about the key things that drive our improvement, it is going to be firstly passion, and then consistency, and then making sure that we've got the right framework or methodology to improve on what we're improving on. And so if we can disrupt this negative self-talk and understand that it's normal for us to feel a little bit discontent, and that we just need to implement that consistency, I think that's going to go a long way. So I hope all that's helpful for you. Again, I wanted this to really relate to people who have or feel a little bit frustrated after their surf sessions, knowing that that is normal, and that there's some strategies that I found personally useful when I've been in that scenario, and then also in the competitive realm as well. So we'll leave it there for today. Hope you all are staying positive and getting some waves this week, and we'll see you in the next one.